Welcome back. I'm joined by Liz Moody to talk about how to come up with a good business idea. So every great product or business starts with just a very, very simple idea. And so many times we think about how ingenious they are, and we're going to talk about some of our favourite innovations. But as we've already seen today, Liz, so many people have had really, really good ideas. But the question then is, do they all make good business sense? And that's what you're here to talk to today, is about how ideas come from, how we can be receptive to more ideas, how we can get new ones, and how we can figure out if they're any good or not. So that is going to be a fantastic session. Now, you have built and run your own businesses, specialising in supporting high growth potential startups as well as small to medium enterprises. So you've got a lot of practical experience about how people can plan an idea, build it up and build a business all around it. And your current research as well is looking at disruption in financial services. So we've spoken before about how it doesn't just have to be a great product or innovation, but services are really, really important. And we've seen from students at home today how their ideas are also focusing on those sorts of things as well. So welcome to today's session. Now, we've asked everyone at home whether they've got ideas or not. And today, in this particular session, we'd like to say, do you have an idea? Yes, no, or maybe. So you can fill in that multi-choice question just by clicking on the option that applies to you. We'd also like to know what your idea is based on. Is it based on a gap in the market, something you feel strongly about, a cause, a product improvement, or your own talents and skills? And complete the statement, my idea solves a problem, meets a need, or is an innovation. And we've also got a word cloud, which is where we need 3 things to be added. If you can only think of 1 or 2, that's absolutely fine. Just put it in and put a full stop in the other boxes, and then your results will submit. What is your favourite innovation? So HJ and George, we've heard loads of people sharing some of their ideas before. What sorts of things have people been talking about in terms of their business idea?
We've had lots of great ideas in the chat. One of the ones that was one of my favourites is an idea to help encourage people recycle. I'm really into that, so anything to help on that front I think is a great idea. Claire would like to start a company to do around building software, which sounds really interesting. And I know Tracy would like to provide a one-stop shop of techniques to support nervous and learner drivers, which sounds good. It sounds like something I needed when I started off as well. I probably still do need something like that. But I know Darren said he has an idea to produce computer programs for people with dyslexia to help them write and just improve their general writing and help them read as well. And Anthony's, I'm not quite sure what his idea is, but he's already got a domain name brought. So yeah, he's one up on any of my ideas, but that's the essential bit we need. As long as you've got a website.
Anthony's being very secretive about it.
That's it,
well, not secretive, he's protecting his intellectual property, which we've talked about being very important. So what do you think of these ideas?
Well, I think there's a really wide range of them, isn't there? So some of them are obviously coming from people's personal passion, and that's really important because I'm sure Rob would say that many people starting a business, it's fine to have the idea, but it's quite a long, lonely journey to get it to come to fruition and bring it to marketplace. So having a great passion for it will keep that inner motivation going and help you to get it along the way. The software one, again, if you've got skills and abilities, that's a great way to build a business from something that you know and you're able to do, especially where it's something you can do that many other people can't. Yeah. The dyslexia idea, that was fantastic too, because you've clearly got an idea of who your target market would be, and if you've got good empathy with who the users of that would be, that's great. I think somebody else was also speaking about a product that parents could use with children. So again, that's an interesting one because then you have 2 types of target audience to think about there. So in your business model canvas, that could be quite an important consideration.
Brilliant. Now we wanted to talk about innovation. So we've got these 2 strands of the competition. One is the business, and then the other is the innovation. What is your favourite innovation?
Oh, can I have a couple? Because I think one of the ones I just saw over the Christmas holidays actually was from, I think it was from the Mashable Twitter feed. I saw this. Was a small portable washing machine that was made just from a plastic tub, and it had a pedal, so it's powered by using your foot to rotate the drum and to clean it. So I really am very, very fond of those kind of innovations that do a job that everybody needs to do, but they do it in an environmentally friendly way, and they also are quite good for you physically, and they don't rob the planet of any more power and generation or fossil fuels. So I love innovations like that because the idea is the same, but the way of delivering it is very, very different. And then also, I mean, I don't know where I'd be without my smartphone, but when you think of the number of innovative ways of doing things in our lives that have come just from that one invention, then it's quite remarkable, really. I mean, I don't know where many of us would be without the smartphone now. So that would be my two favourites of the moment.
Because I think one of the things that often when I think, you know, you come up with ideas and you think, if only this could be better, and we've seen how people are identifying gaps in the market. My children don't have this, or there's loads for the children but not for the parents, or there's so people are sort of seeing gaps. But you know, you sort of talk about the smartphone, and I normally think, oh, if I was entering a competition, I'd want something amazing like a smartphone. But what you're saying, I guess, is that there's a big range of things, and to be innovative and to have a good business model is about sort of identifying that gap and that need and doing something slightly different. It doesn't have to be massively different.
No, in fact, there's very few inventions that come about. That's quite a rare way that entrepreneurship happens. It's far, far more likely that people are going to find better ways of doing things. But good ideas just come from thinking, whether it's a structure to think about it or whether it's just something that occurs to you because you're more observant, because you experience something, you think, that's not very good. There's got to be a better way of doing that. That's where a lot of the ideas will come from.
Well, I asked my husband to give me some things because he's always going, oh, this is a brilliant innovation. And he's got, he does classic cars, and so he's got a workshop. So I said, well, what are some of these innovations and why are they so amazing? And I've got some here today. And actually, they are amazing because these are all sort of based on the simple idea of magnets and screws. And so basically, these are some sort of common screws that you'd have. And he's got this dish, which is a magnetised dish, so that if you're working on a car, you can stick it on the side and it'll stay on the car and have the magnets there so that if you're upside down underneath, the screws can connect to it. So it's so magnetised. And then things like this, which magnetises a screwdriver so that you can then pick up and it will stick to that, and then you can go and put that in the hole that you need to. This also has a little torch that shines, so if you're in a dark place. But these are all so, so simple out of somebody going, I can't find that. There must be a way of actually being able to do this. This is a long one that's got a little light on the end so you can shine it down. This is amazing because, of course, when you get screws on the driveway or nails, this picks them all up. It's just got a magnetised thing. So it's like a broom but picks up things.
I feel like we're on the shopping channel here.
It is. You can buy all of these off of eBay.
Or get one of these little magazines that come through your door every quarter, and sadly I look at them and I think, do I really want to repel those mosquitoes? Anyway.
No, but this is it. And so having one of those ideas that comes out of some sort of need can be a very, very simple thing that combines two things together, like we've seen before, in terms of meeting some sort of need.
Yeah. And it doesn't always even have to be a need. You could be solving a problem, but we're human beings, so we have different needs. So somebody was talking about software. So you think of the sort of dating sites and things like that. There's social needs that people have as well, or people that really want to do something for the planet, do something for their community. So these are all things that either solve a problem because they fulfill a gap, or they enable people to do things more easily, or they are genuinely in a technical way very, very good to do. So the software things tend to be easier ways of people doing things or delivered in a different way.
Yeah, but I guess the one key thing is, one, if you're going to spend your lifetime being around magnetised screws, you've got to be really passionate about that particular area, that particular market, all the people around that. And having that passion is something that seems to be something very central that needs to certainly be evident in your business idea, irrespective of whether it's innovation or just a business idea.
Well, even just going back to Robert talking about the competition, as you get to a point where you've created your business model canvas, at some point you have to hit the enemy with that, the enemy being the marketplace or being somebody that might want to invest in it. So who's going to invest in you if you're not passionate about it? Why should they be passionate about it? Why, and that passion does come through. But the passion for carrying on doing what you're doing with the sort of magnetic screws might be eventually you see, I want to build this business. I want to distribute this. I want to take it to another country. So there's always something to do. And I think that's the drive that people who are genuinely entrepreneurial are. It's not only about the product, it is about the business, it is about making things successful.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we asked people at home what their favourite innovations are. Let's see what they had to say. Wind-up radio, that's a great one. Apple Pay, yes. Non-stick, that is a brilliant invention. Paperclip, iPhone, smartphone, screen protector, flexi chopping board, boiling tap. Oh yes, they're brilliant. SD card. Okay, so some really good ideas. A lot of those technical things, but some of them conceptual, things like contactless payment and things that actually make processes a lot easier as well. So we're also going to see what your idea is based on. So if you haven't filled those interactive widgets in then, please do so we can know about that. So the idea we think is great. Again, there's this whole thing about how marketable it is because, you know, even if we have an interest in this sort of thing, it may be that there is an interest of 2 people in the world. and ultimately, to make a good business, you need enough interest out there. So how do we know our ideas are any good?
Well, you've got to test them, and there's no getting away from it. You can't keep it all in your own head. So, as I already said, at some point you're going to have to make a pitch, whether the pitch is to get people to buy it or the pitch is to get people to invest in it. So that's the first thing that you might do. But before you get to that point, it's always worth doing something like a focus group. And a focus group might be something like gathering a group of people. It could be friends and family initially, if you don't want to sort of put yourself through the trauma of bringing some strangers together, and you present the idea and you simply listen and observe what that feedback is. Because you get instant feedback to that. You might get questions, you might get more ideas, you might get instant interest, you might get your first customer. So it's always worth speaking to other people and bouncing that idea off other people. And there's no getting away from that. You can't make it the best kept secret. It won't go anywhere if it's only you that knows about it. But the other thing you can do if you don't want to formally structure a focus group is just network. Go and meet other people. Do your research on the internet and see what other people's solutions to the same problems are. And you'll find whether or not these are popular, whether or not you're unique, whether or not if you're unique, then the first thing, if you're a doubter, might be to say it might be unique because nobody's interested in it. But actually you might have hit on something that's really pretty special. So that's the point where you want to test it with other people.
Yeah, but I think that listening can be hard, especially when you're really passionate about something. I know, you know, there are times when I've had an idea or a thought and I'm so convinced it's the best thing. I'll tell people and then they'll say something and I think, no, you don't understand. And I'm conscious that sometimes it can be very hard to hear the feedback and to listen to it and take that on board, which is ultimately really only going to improve what you're doing. How would you recommend people sort of try to do that, bearing in mind how hard it can be when you're passionate?
Well, I think that you have to probably take a cross-section of views, because the first person you speak to might just be the only person that disagrees with you and 5 other people completely on side with you. So it has to be a sort of sample and maybe a cross-sample of people that you're going to speak to. That would be one thing. But the second thing is just to, although you feel passionate about it, you have to depersonalise it a little bit, because at many points during the point from your idea through to taking it into a business, you're going to hit some barriers. So you have to kind of toughen up a little bit and recognise that the feedback is valuable. So many people will learn from failures. Even some of the people like the James Dysons of the world who come up with an idea, it doesn't always work. Richard Branson, we only hear about these people's successes. We rarely hear about the disasters, but there are plenty of them. And even if they're disasters, they might only be disasters because one thing needs to change about them. So if you listen really carefully, what you'll hear is maybe one aspect that needs to change. It doesn't mean the whole idea is wrong. And so it might be, but and again, follow up and just say, well, what would be a better way of doing that? Or how else might you do that? So use it as an opportunity to think of it as being a development opportunity for you and for the product.
Now, this is a really important point you've made, because, like you say, so often we think about the end product, but you know, the first ideas really end up with what they end up being is a success. You know, often, as you say, they'll evolve, things will get better. It's about taking things and thinking about which particular aspects need to be refined. What advice can you give people about sort of bearing in mind that process and about using feedback to effectively evolve a product? In particular, those people who think, well, I've got my idea and it's absolutely brilliant right now. Which it may be, but
it might well be brilliant, but it might not be marketable, for example, because there aren't, as you said, there might be only 2 people out there. So if your plan is to be a millionaire, they're going to have to be able to be prepared to pay at least £500,000 each to make you that £1 million before you get your costs and things. So What you have to understand is quite a lot. That the business model canvas is good for this because it's not only the product, it's about how you distribute that product, and therefore it might be that you have to understand how you're going to reach that target market, how many of those people are there, who you're competing against. So there are quite a number of considerations to think about before your whole idea is going to be successful.
Yeah, and it's again tapping onto the benefit and the value of your product. And value is something that's incredibly important.
Yes, and we can look at value in a number of different ways. So there's the obvious one, which is the financial value of it. Do people see it as an innovation or a product that's worth paying for? And then there's value that can be added through in a behavioural way. So if you have a service, a shop, or you have a social enterprise where people meet, then if they come somewhere and they have a very good experience and people treat them well and they behave well to them, there's value in that sense, that experience that people have. There's value from the user experience of something. So if we make things very easy for people to do, then again we might call that sort of operational value. But the most important aspect of value is to be on the same lines as your customers are, to be thinking in the same way as them. And that's the whole starting point for your idea, thinking like the customer. And it comes back to your point about us being passionate, that's fine. But unless we're the kind of person that the product is being made for and we're very similar to our customers, we're still thinking of it from the point of view, here's my product for you, and we have to start with the customer in mind. So think like them, get the pricing right, make them feel good about interacting with you, and make it easy for them to access it and use it and follow up and correct any mistakes or deal. So many of the sort of never knowingly undersold kind of promises, those kind of things are all about delivering that added value around the product itself.
And of course, the other important thing is being able to reach the people who have a need for the product. That whole aspect of evaluating the market. How big is my market? Who are these people? But also, can I get to them? Because if you can't get to them, the most brilliant idea is not worth it.
Yeah. Well, you don't have a market if you can't reach them, if you don't know who you're speaking to, because all of your marketing, all of your distribution, the way that you reach people, the language that you use, how you package it, the pricing level, this all is set by the target market. That's your starting point of the target audience.
Brilliant. Now, we've asked people at home whether or not they have an idea. 69% of them do have an idea. So a lot of people are watching that with ideas, and we've heard a lot of them already, and we haven't heard from some of them for other reasons as well. 13% say no, they don't have an idea yet, and 19% say maybe, which I think is a very, very interesting idea. So it's sort of, I guess, on that borderline. So this programme should be very, very useful for you, thinking about how you might conceptualise that. And in the next session, we're going to talk about the business model canvas and all the particulars that you might need to look at as well for that. But let's see what people said their ideas were based on, because we've talked about those various sort of strands. So in our multi-choice question, we asked you what your idea is based on, and this is what you said. So the highest is their own talents and skills, coming in at 40%. 20% of people have said it's about a gap in the market or something they feel very strongly about. 13% have said it's about a cause, and only 7% have said it's about a product improvement, which is very interesting considering that we're often talking about these ideas in terms of something that we think should be so spectacular. It needs to be incredibly innovative as a product.
Yeah. Well, there's incremental improvement to things, and that's how. I mean, we had a telephone before we had a smartphone. We had the wired. We were able to pay with cash before we had contactless. So these things are incremental. They're very clever, but they are incremental, and they have other beneficial effects as well. The gap in the market. That's quite an interesting one. I'm just going back to the point about people not having an idea. I would say to you that if you have an inkling to do something, keep working on it until you've decided it's not a good idea to work on, because if you're anything like me, I have hundreds of ideas a day, and by the next day I've persuaded myself out of them. And actually do something with it, because that whole way of thinking about things, understanding them, doing a little bit of research, observing what's out there in the market, these are good discovery skills, and they're good ways of saying, well, actually, that idea I had, I'm never going to pursue that, but because I have looked at this, I can now see something else that I am more interested in. So keep going with it.
And as Rob said before, you know, based on the number of people who were initially interested, there was only a small number who actually did progress with that. And he sort of said it's really important to keep building up on that idea. So get this business model canvas and start adding your post-its or ideas to it, so that you can then start thinking about how it might be
And
or
it's,
not.
and it's not a problem if you work your way through that and think, no, this isn't going to work out. That's actually quite a good result from it,
Yeah.
because from it, you might have other ideas, or
Yeah.
because you can innovate anywhere in that business
Yeah.
model.
Yeah.
And that's what some people were saying in the poll as well,
Yeah.
wasn't it? That
Yeah.
it's not, I want to use my own talents and skills. They won't necessarily be unique talents
Yeah.
and skills. So for them, the secret might be to say, so how will I make my business more appealing than the other people in the marketplace? Will it be because I'm working in a geography that nobody else is working in, which is sort of a gap in the market as well? Or will I deliver this in the same way? Will I do something that's direct? Will I do something through, through a partnership or something else? I read a statistic over the weekend, over the Christmas holidays, about the large number of people that are taking over franchise businesses now. That's not a new idea, that's a business model that exists, but they're making it their own and they're running it in successful ways. So there are lots of ways we can start a business, sometimes just being very, very good at doing something and doing it in a slightly different way. That will be enough to be successful.
Brilliant. Okay, now we haven't had many replies yet so far, but our most challenging question, which is what innovation do you wish someone would come up with? Which I think is hopefully food for thought for people who don't know if they've got an idea or not. So let us know if there's something you think, I wish someone would invent something that could let me know, whether there are any car parking spaces in this area or da-da-da-da-da. I think that would be quite good. But yeah.
I know mine. This morning on the drive in, my commute in today, for some unknown reason, there was a massive tailback. And I was giving my husband a lift and he said, oh, this is where we need somebody to invent a car on boosters that take you up. And I said, no. Transporter beam. I want the Star Trek transporter beam. Say, beam me up, Scotty, and drop me at my desk. That's definitely what I want.
Someone's come up with an idea about something that would motivate me to exercise. I mean, that's a hard one.
Well, actually, funnily enough, I have this thing on.
Yeah.
There's lots of them, lots of different makes of them. But that's another interesting thing. It's a digital watch, but it has a step counter and it uses behavioural psychology. So that sort of nudge theory of the fact that you're counting your steps and you look at your steps. So several of my friends now, we've all got these and we're saying, how many steps have you done today? And you think, well, my target's 10,000, but I've only done 8,000. It's that incentive to think, I can do another 1,800 steps. It's not a problem to do that. So interestingly, people are using their psychology of things to help people to do it, and technology can help to do that, so you never know.
Brilliant. No, exactly. Okay, well, all good ideas. I'm sure we'll be thinking about those as we continue today's programme. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Liz, is this idea about value and where you position yourself in the market. Because very often we come up with an idea and we think about a concept and we think, I'm going to have excellent customer service, or I'm going to charge a very high price and I'm going to use very premium packaging or products. I'm going to give first-class postage or blah, blah, blah. There are all these various things that people need to sort of bear in mind. Now, we can't all be the John Lewises, for example. There needs to be a range of things. How would you sort of recommend students think about their ideas in terms of both the product or innovation or service that they've got, and also the level of service or the way, the ethical stance, really, of the way that their business would operate, bearing in mind that we often have these ideals, but those ideals may not be compatible for everybody?
Well, I think one of the most important thing is probably to think of it in terms of consistency. So clearly, if you have something that's very, very cheap and cheerful and you want to charge the earth for it, then people are not going to see that. So it comes back to my point about how people see value, how they perceive value. So if you think of a very prestigious brand, what are the things that they do with that? They tend to try and make these things exclusive. So they become exclusive because they will set a price that's very high. They become exclusive because they're only available in certain outlets and people know that they're not going to be able to buy them in TK Maxx, or they're not going to be able to buy them in Poundland. So it's a question of being consistent about what we're actually getting for that. But it's also about where you set your level of what kind of return and expectation of a return you might want to have for it. So if it's a social enterprise, you might be wanting to plough the money back into your business. It doesn't mean to say that you're not generating income, but that's what you're trying to do with it. So it is very much about setting out what it is you're seeking to achieve and what you think will work for you. But what doesn't work is to say you're not going to have Harrods allow you stocking something that you can also buy in Poundland. And in Poundland, you're not going to have people buying things for, you know, £5,000. So understanding how you distribute it, where your customers shop, where they're likely to look for it, but also just understanding what are the costs that are going into me developing this product, the cost of me delivering this product, the cost of packaging it. Am I putting too much in to make the return that I need to get out for it? So it is really trying to balance out and get a consistent view on what it is that you're trying to do with it. You can put too much in and it costs you too much and you don't make any profit, and ultimately down the line your business won't be sustainable. Or you can not put enough into it and get your pricing wrong, and again equally you won't sell very much. So there's very much a balancing act which you have to test and learn to a certain extent, but also look and see who else you're comparing yourself in the marketplace, but who your customers are also comparing themselves to. So there's a lot of research that can be done that will help you to set your price and to set your and to understand your costs as well.
When I've been talking to other winners of this competition before, what they've said is that the business thing was fine. You know, that's good. You're passionate about something. You can see how it works. Market research, not a problem at all. But it's then starting to think about those, I guess, operational decisions ultimately that you need to start making. Do I want to have really premium paper to print these cards on, or am I going to do it like this? What media do I need to deliver things in? Where is the value in that? That were more challenging. And I know that from students today, I mean, we've heard that it's not important to be studying business at the Open University or entrepreneurship as well. Anybody can do things. But this process and going through this competition allows you to both have a formula to sort of think about, not a formula, a template, I guess, to think about your business in those things that you may not have ever thought about before and that are really, really important because they can be the make or break, can't they?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely they can. And I think it's almost the discipline of thinking these things through that helps you with that. Just thinking about the different customer relationships you have, the different customer segments, really getting underneath, understanding that will help you to understand what you really do need to deliver. But there's a writer called Eric Ries who talks about the minimal viable product. And I think that's quite a good place to start for people who are developing a new product or service. Don't start start with what the least you can do that is acceptable to your customers. Start with that and then embellish as you get this feedback from them, because if you put all the bells and whistles on, then some people will like them, but they're not fundamentally what's the most important thing you do about it. So start with the minimum and build it from there as you get the feedback would be my advice.
Yes, and again, it's about, I guess, putting value on things. So you've got your product, and then if you're offering this no quibble returns guarantee or first class post, everything comes with a cost, and it's about the value then that contributes to the overall business.
Yes, exactly. And you've got to measure these things. So it's understanding, measuring them, and taking the feedback as we go.
And also, some of the things you're talking about are costs, and some are not costs, but they're value. So it's about the dimensions of value also in terms of things that may actually be an outlay to you as a business, or something that you could add for free, like a warm greeting or answering emails in 24 hours.
And that was the experience we spoke about. So, or making it very easy for people, one click through to get something, or somebody with a bright smiley voice answering the phone, or somebody who, because we have the technology to do it, somebody who recognises, oh, hi Karen, how are you getting on? Those kind of personal touches don't cost anything, but they do make a huge difference, and they may well differentiate you from a lot of other people out there in the marketplace.
Okay. Now, before we go to the hot desk, I just wanted to tap into one idea, which is called pivoting. And this links to something you were talking about earlier, about perhaps things not being as they seem. Tell us about that.
So the pivot is this idea that you start off with your idea, something you really do want to do. Pivoting isn't about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's simply this idea that you evaluate what it is that you're trying to do, and based on this feedback, there might be some aspect of it that you need to change, and that can come from any aspect in your business model canvas. So it could be that you decide that it might be a product pivot. So you might have to strip out some of these bells and whistles in the product because you find out that nobody's really as interested, or it's not as, nobody really minds if it's got this extra button on it. That's just design. Some people are interested in simplifying things. But it could also be that you could, for example, find that the product that you design for dyslexic students actually there's a huge uptake from schools from it, from teaching and teaching professionals. So that might then mean that that's where your target market is, because these people actually influence more of the sale of your products than the end user does. So that would be a customer pivot. And so if you work your way around the business canvas, it could be all sorts of ways. It might be that your business model needs to pivot slightly. So you thought that you would distribute through a chain of outlets, but actually to go direct makes more sense. So that's the idea of the pivot, that it's a different way of delivering your end goal.
Yeah, or even if you find out there are certain standards or products, or we've been talking as well about non-disclosure and protecting your ideas also.
Yeah, exactly. So it might be that actually you find that you've designed somebody and somebody has a patent for it, so you have to make a change to the design to it. You don't know until you get into these kind of things, but these are things that all businesses do. Eventually there's a need to do it. It's very, very common.
And
it's not a sign of failure.
Word,
exactly.
It's nice because it shows how you just pick up and move on and refocus slightly.
Slight, 15 degrees to the right.
And that's a natural part of the whole process. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Liz, this has been so helpful. I just want to take a quick trip to HJ and George. How are you and how is everyone at home?
Well, we're all doing well in the chat, and there's lots of questions which I think will be great to address in our Q&A session. But I know George has a fantastic business idea he's spotted in the chat.
Well, I thought this would be really good. It's one where people are getting or planning on like a Fitbit with an electric shock device in it.
Oh!
So that when you don't...
Get off your lazy butt and do something.
Well,
I don't know about
you
the
might
electric
decide you want
shock.
to do something, get halfway through it, and you still haven't completed it, and it's saying, well, you should have completed that, I'll give you a shock.
Well,
And they're going to call it sick buzz.
the stick and the carrot approach. I'm sure we've got different
Libby's
types
not
of
sure
people.
it's the most ethical business idea, which I think she's on something there.
Yeah, standards. So, all right. Well, Liz, that's been incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for coming along to us
Good
today.
luck, everyone.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're going to show you now a video about the business model canvas, because that's going to be the focus of our next session, where I'll be joined by Carolyn Decalange to talk about that. So join me for a few minutes for that next session. See you then.